All right, let's talk about the serve. So it's been about a year since I uploaded my last video talking about my serve technique progressions, and since then, quite a lot has changed. So after that point in time, I played a bunch of tournaments throughout the summer, and I think this is quite normal for most players, and coaches will know this, but technique tends to regress when you go through a big tournament patch, especially when the technique transformation is pretty fresh. If you don't constantly work on it and you go through a big patch where you're doing competitions, you regress to what you normally do and what's natural, and then you tend to lose some sort of stuff. So the way that my technique looked after that period of time was very different to the way it looked when I finished that last video talking about my serve progression. So I had a very different image to work from, and over the last 5-6 months, I've been really trying to progress that technique to the technique that I have now. So the structure of this video is going to be very similar to the structure of the last video I did, where I'm going to show you where my serve was at, show you some of the exercises and techniques I did to improve it, and then show you where it is now. This video is not a how to serve video. I'm purely going to be talking about the issues that I had with my serve and how I improved it. And if you have similar problems within your serve, this might be helpful as well. So let's get straight into it. Now, first off, let's just take a look at how I progressed my technique from the last time. So I had a lot of hyper-angulation in the shoulder, where my elbow was going way past the shoulder. I didn't really have a good loading position, and I had quite a lot of arch in my back. So what I did was I used the Kovacs methodology and really worked on that back leg load so that I got into this position, could really sink and twist into the hip, and then I stayed on a little bit longer. And what I also did was incorporate a little bit of like an abbreviated action within the serve. So I went from here and then almost straight up, and then went with the timing of sort of like a JJ Wolf or kind of like a Roddick style, where it was like really abbreviated, got a good loading position, and then drove up and then tried to stay side on a little bit more. So going into the tournament, it had its positives, but also had its negatives. So as time progressed, I didn't get as good a load with it, and I also found that I was getting quite a lot of arm pain, which is kind of ironic because the whole reason I wanted to try and improve my technique, obviously to get a better serve and get more power and accuracy and all that stuff, but also to prevent injuries, right? If I got a hyper-angulation of the shoulder and the elbow's coming out here, that's a massive injury risk. So I was kind of a bit baffled as to why, with the improved technique, I was going into tournaments and finishing matches with quite a lot of arm pain. Now, I know that with new technique, that can be different for the body, and the shoulder needs to adjust and get used to it. But I had had this technique for quite a few months without any issues. So why, playing a 3-hour match with the new improved technique, was I getting the arm pain? And I think it's because with that abbreviated action, it was quite forced and muscular rather than relaxed and fluid. So with a longer and looser action, you don't use the muscles as much. Whereas when I'm bringing it up here, it's like up and then forced and go. And although it got me quite a lot of power, it wasn't sustainable. My arm was getting tired, and my serve got worse as the match went along, basically. So that was one issue. And then obviously the other issue was that if I wasn't practicing the loading with my legs, then the technique was getting worse. And that's basically why the serve went from looking like this to looking like this. And as we watch this video back, you'll be able to see not as good turn in the hips. I get my elbow past my shoulder again. And then of course, this is opening up here with the wrist, getting into that weighted position a little bit. The results of my serves were okay. They weren't really at like the pro level that I was really trying to go for. If you go back and watch some of my matches before I started baseline to pro, you can see that I served okay in some matches, but it still wasn't giving me enough free points. So that was sort of the reason why I went back and wanted to try and fix my serve again. Now, the stuff that I use to improve my serve comes from many different sources. Obviously, my own knowledge and my own experience as a coach and a player myself. I also got advice from other coaches here at the Doug Lee Academy. And as you know, if you watched the previous video, I also took part in the Kovacs serve course. So when I'm explaining this video, there's not one place where these exercises or opinions come from. They're kind of like accumulated from different places, and I kind of formed my own opinions about the serve from that. So the first thing that I think is really important is you've got to work your way up through the serve. So if the grip's wrong, you got to fix the grip. If your foot position's wrong, you fix that. And then you can start thinking about the ball toss, and then the loading, and then the racket action through the serve. And if I'm being quite honest, my ball toss is not that great. And I spent a lot of time working on the loading and the throwing action of the serve without actually cracking down on the ball toss. So if the ball toss is in the wrong position, you're going to be in wrong positions out here, and you can't really expect yourself to get in good positions on the serve if you're making contact way behind your head or in front of you, and it's just going to lead to errors within the serve going forward. So the first thing I wanted to crack down on that ball toss, and it's quite simple, but an exercise that I like to do is just placing a little box with yellow lines, or you can put your racket down in front of you and trying to just get that ball toss landing on that racket each time. So it would essentially be like me putting my racket down here, coming up, throwing the ball up, and then trying to get it to land every time on that racket. So that's sort of the first exercise. But what's really important is that you do it with your serve technique. So there's no point in just using your left arm to throw it up and down every time, because when you go into the serve, it's going to feel different. So really try and do it where you're doing your full routine even. You're here, you're coming in, you're getting into your loading position, and you can even pause there. I think that's a good place to stop, and then see if the ball lands in your target zone area, because at least then it's not going to be too dissimilar to your normal service action when you're actually performing it. So that was the first thing that I really did to improve this serve technique. And the next thing I did was really crack down on this loading position again. And the exercises in this one are going to be slightly different to the ones that I did in the previous video. There's some good loading exercises there, including the one leg serve, putting a sponge ball under the heel so you can really feel that weight within your back leg a little bit more. The ones I did here were a little bit more basic, and the ones that you can do with younger kids as well. So you're going to be getting into like a serving position in a platform sort of stance. You're going to sink and twist on the back leg, load on the back leg, and then you're going to shoot the ball into the air and then try and stay in that side on positioning here. And if you can see, I go onto my tiptoe on the back leg. So I'm here, I sink and twist down here, and then it's almost a shot put, and then I pull my left arm into my stomach and try and get the elbow on the belly button and really reach over this way, rather than turning around here. That's what quite a lot of juniors do as well when they're trying to serve. They rotate round rather than cartwheel sort of action. So you can progress this on in different ways. I think starting with a tennis ball is a good option, and then you could almost get like a little bit of like a weighted heavier ball. You could do the same thing and really try and explode, see if you can do it a little bit quicker, but maintain those correct positionings. And then you can do it with your racket as well. So you're here, you're loading in it, and then you can really reach up and then try and swing through and stay in that side on positioning, crossing the arms over a little bit, and then you're here. So sink and twist down and then reach up this way. And that's a good way of doing it as well. So I did that multiple times a week, and then straight after I do shadow serves. So I'd be here trying to get that feeling into a little bit more of an action, feeling like I'm staying side on through that contact a little bit more. And then the next progression of that would be to do an actual serve, but not serving in the court. And that's a real key thing for me, is if you're trying to implement a sort of technical improvement, don't do it on the tennis court where you're actually trying to serve over the net, because then you'll automatically in your mind regress to what you did before, because you're trying to get the ball in the court subconsciously, even if you tell yourself you're not trying to. So either turn around, serve it into the fence, or get yourself away from a tennis court. There was a curtain in our little fitness zone, so I did the exercise there. I just served, tried to maintain the technique as best as I could, and serve it into the curtain. And that was really my way of trying to improve my loading position over time and try and see if that would transfer into the serve when I was actually playing. Okay, so I guess the question now is, did these loading progressions that I did over a month or two really impact my serve, and did it result in a better loading position on my serve and fix the problems within it? And the answer is yes and no. It did help a little bit, but not as much as I wanted. And I think there's multiple reasons for this. And the first one I think is because I did a lot of these progressions in the platform stance, because it's quite hard to do it in the pinpoint, I found, because you lost your balance and it was really hard to find that load whilst keeping the balance and chucking the ball, and then I'd stay unbalanced. So I would do it in the platform stance, and then when I was trying to bring it in, I couldn't get that feeling that I had practiced. So I think going from doing the exercises in the platform to having a pinpoint in my serve was quite a big issue. And what I found within the drive of my pinpoint serve, there was a little bit of an energy leak. And was it a big issue? No. But does it contribute to a lack of power? Yes. So should you fix it? I think probably. And what was happening was, as I was coming out of my loading position on my serve in the pinpoint stance, my knees were coming out a little bit, and that lost a bit of energy and it didn't get as much transfer up to the ball. And so what I decided to do was go back to the platform stance. And if you watch the previous video, you'll know that the reason for me going into a pinpoint from my previous serve as a platform was because as I was trying to get the load better, the muscle memory that I had before just wasn't transferring for me. So going into the pinpoint, I could feel the back leg load a little bit better, So now it's kind of the reverse. I've been doing the exercises within the platform stance. So now when I experimented serving within that platform stance, it was actually a decent load. I didn't have the same problems as before, and I didn't have that energy leak that I was doing. So it kind of seems a little bit strange in my head going from a platform stance to pinpoint and then back to platform again. But the progression that my serve has taken me has led me to this. So if you're thinking about changing from like a platform to a pinpoint or vice versa, I'd only do it if you have a solid reasoning behind it and you know why you're doing it, basically. So over time I was serving with this platform stance, and the idea that I had was that if I get my loading better, then it's going to fix my upper body stuff. It's going to get my throwing action better, it's going to help me stay side on longer, all these things. And did it? Yes, to a certain extent. It did help me stay side on for a little bit longer, but the racket throw action wasn't improving as a result. This is something that I thought would happen, and the reason why I don't think it was happening for me is because I'm 25 and my service action is so ingrained with this racket action. I've done it for 15 years and it's just so molded into my body that even though I'm creating a better load and twist and I don't need to find that extra range, it's still doing it because it's got such a muscle memory of it. Whereas when I do these loading exercises with the younger players that I'm coaching, it does tend to fix their upper body problems because the body's still growing, it's adapting, and they're still learning, and they haven't got that ingrained muscle memory. So the body's going to figure out a comfortable position, and if you've got that range that you've created from a good loading position, naturally the body's going to adjust. But for me, because I'm older and it's ingrained within myself, it wasn't doing it. I spoke to some other coaches and they kind of recommended that I do try and just isolate the upper body a little bit more. Now that the loading's a bit better, I try and get that racket action fixed. What I did next was an exercise that I explained in the previous video, but it was that abbreviated serve. So I just throw it up, work on having that racket come behind my head and then up through the ball, not getting in that weighted position and having a good position for my elbow. And I did a lot of serving like that, and I found that I could do it quite naturally. When I was starting here, I was able to throw it up, I was getting good power, I was keeping a good elbow position, the racket was going behind my head, I was accelerating through the ball, and it was all working quite well, and I had that muscle memory, it was really good. But whenever I tried to get it back into a normal, fuller service action, I couldn't do it, and it just reverted to what I did before, where it was a little bit more open here, elbow was out here, and it got into a little bit of this position. So no matter how much I did that abbreviated serve, whenever I went back into the full serve, it wasn't happening for me. And was that because, as I said before, it's so ingrained within myself, my normal service action? Maybe, and I kind of thought it was, but then I saw this really interesting post that actually Sean Malcolm shared on Instagram. And if you don't follow Sean Malcolm, I really recommend you do that. He's a coach based in the UK and shares really interesting stuff on his Instagram about ways that coaches should be coaching, and I think it's useful for players to see it as well. He does a lot on the constraints-led approach of the game. But anyway, the thing that he shared, I think it was from someone else, and basically what that person was trying to discuss was whether breaking down a complex action like a golf swing or a serve, for example, into smaller parts and improving those small parts, does that actually help the full serve or golf swing, and does it make it better? And I think the argument was that if you focus too much on the small part of it, out of context with the whole thing, it's not going to help that full action that much because it's going to feel different and it doesn't feel like your normal service action. So that really resonated with me because I was having that problem with my abbreviated serve, and I wasn't able to put it back into the full serve, even though I could do it starting from here. You do see players on the tour with a fully abbreviated serve. They essentially like bringing their arm up and then they throw it up from here. So that was an option, but the reason why I decided to go against doing that was because of what I said before. When I had that abbreviated serve, it felt muscular and I was getting pain in my shoulder, and I didn't really want to get back to a state where I was tight in a match. I was trying to hit a big serve and it was just force. I really want everything to be nice and loose because that's when I feel like I get no pain, and that's when I feel like I can generate enough power on it. So where did I go from here? I had to find a way to get my elbow in the right place and that racket action behind my head correct within the full swing of a serve without breaking it down. The way that I did that was basically just through experimentation. I experimented with different ways that I brought up the racket, experimented with different timings that I brought it up as well. And what I found was that when I had the abbreviated serve, I was kind of trying to, I use this analogy with the kids, and I think some other YouTube coaches talk about it, but trying to like knock something off your head. So I was kind of like coming this way. So it's here and then through there, here and then through there. And me trying to bring that into my serve with the way that I naturally brought the racket back over this time just wasn't working for me. But you see a lot of pros, they do have the racket coming back past the head, but it's not always in like a wristy motion. It just sometimes comes here. So I kind of had the thought of, what if I just bring the racket up to the side and then I just let it come back this way rather than trying to get this wristy coming over the head here? And that seemed to work better for me. So it's just getting that feeling of getting to here and just that racket coming back past the head here rather than here. And it's really quite subtle, but it clicked for me. And that's how I was able to really get a full action of my serve with a good racket action behind my head and then up and through to the ball. Now, one last thing I focused on, which did help with this, was really trying to get the throwing action leading with the elbow. So rather than feeling like there's heavy weight at the top of the racket and I'm trying to bring it around this way like there, I felt I'm just going to go with my elbow first and really try and get that. So it's that chain reaction. So I'm here, elbow comes first, like you're trying to throw something as far as you can. You don't lead with the end of your hand, you lead with the elbow here, and it's that snap there that really gets the power on it. So when I'm coming to here, and I got it up through here, and then once I got into this position, I just thought, right, elbow comes first, and then I'm there. Elbow here, and then I'm coming through the serve. And that was the last little thing that really clicked it and put the serve back together for me. So if we have a look at a before and after now of where that serve was the second time and where it is now, let's really see the difference. All right, so is this serve that I'm with now perfect? Absolutely not. I could still definitely have a slightly better load. I could stay side on for longer. I could be a little bit looser and quicker through the action here. And I'm sure there's 100 other things that could be a little bit better with it. But is it so much better than it was before? 100%. A few final thoughts about the serve is that it's such a complex action. I think it's the most difficult action to get right in tennis. And there's so many different opinions from different coaches and different ways to approach it that it can just get so confusing and you don't know what to do. But I think you just got to experiment. You've got to try and pick out the areas within your serve and really try and find the root cause within them. And you just got to approach with a little bit of common sense. All our bodies are completely different. All our service actions are slightly different. Obviously, there's key elements within the serve that you want to look pretty similar to the pros in the different stages of the serve. But all our bodies are different and the way that we do things are different. So doing the same thing for every single person, everybody's serve journey is going to be different. So it just takes a lot of time and a lot of experimentation to get right for you. I think it's also important to say that you shouldn't obsess over technique. I am guilty of this myself, especially on the serve, because this was the weakest part of my game for the longest time, so I really wanted to get it right. But you see so many different ways that people hit the ball on the Pro Tour, and let's be honest, as long as you can get a pop on the serve, you get a good accuracy, it's going to be pretty decent. There's going to be stuff that you can improve on every shot. So I wouldn't obsess over it, but hopefully me sharing my journey about my serve has given you a few different ways that you might be able to improve your serve, or at least helps your thought process on how to approach improving your serve a little bit better. And I hope this video wasn't really long because I've been filming this for about an hour now, so I think I have talked way too much, but I'll see you in the next one.